Welcome, everyone. It's nice to have you all here today evening. We are still waiting for some other friends to join. And while waiting, I would like to share some preliminary information for the evening. Um, and then I will introduce our speaker or guest today more properly, of course. So this meeting is recorded. This is an MLE Friends webinar that is recorded for the sake of sharing it with other interested friends in the future later. For now, it's exclusive for our friends, MLE Friends only. We will share it with all those members of the community who cannot be here today in the first round, and then after a few months, we will share it with the general public on our YouTube channel so that others can also benefit from Steven's wisdom tonight. If you will have any questions during the program, please post them in the chat. With a little symbol, whether you would like to read the question yourself in the discussion phase, or you would like me to read it for Steven, because you might be in a situation when you cannot read or cannot ask the question yourself. And then I will do that. It's yeah, 6:03, so I think we can start. My name is Gabor Karsai. I'm Managing Director of Mind and Life Europe, and I'm the host of today's webinar. I hope you will all enjoy the talk today. Our speaker tonight is Professor Dr. Steven Laureys from Belgium and Canada. Steven is an award-winning neurologist and neuroscientist, recognized worldwide as a leading clinician and researcher in the field of neurology of consciousness. He is an active member of Mind and Life Europe and former president of the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness, and has published over 500 scientific articles on the workings of the human mind. He is known for his studies on consciousness after coma, but also on near-death experiences, anesthesia, dreaming, hypnosis, and meditation. He is research director at the Belgian National Fund for Scientific Research, funding director of the GIGA Consciousness Research Unit and COMA Science Group of the University of Liège, and Centre du Cerveau at the University Hospital of Liège, and also visiting professor at Cerveau Brain Research Center in Canada. And he recently co-founded the MindCare International Foundation and published the international bestseller, the No Nonsense Meditation book, in collaboration with Matthieu Ricard. And that's the title of his speech tonight, the No Nonsense Meditation book. And I will not tell more about that because I'm really curious what it means myself. And you will explain that, Steven, to us. Thank you for joining us and for giving this talk to our community. And I would like to probably ask you to lead us into a moment of silence before diving into the rich content of your speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gabor. I hope you can see my screen now. You can hear.
Yes.
And I think it's a great idea to, as usual, start with a 1-minute moment of contemplation and meditation in your favorite flavor and exercise. I heard a beep. Is that a signal we should start now? Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. I definitely am out of my comfort zone right now. I never ever thought I would be giving lectures, webinars on meditation. And of course, I'm especially intimidated because of the audience we have tonight. Extremely happy to have the Mind and Life Europe friends here. And who am I actually to talk about meditation, not being a Zen master, not having during my studies as a medical doctor, ever having something in my courses about meditation. So it's a very interesting exercise, where as a scientist, and I really must thank Mind and Life Europe here, and Matthieu Ricard, who will kind of be the red thread throughout the talk, for introducing me to something I really knew extremely little about. And my comfort zone is what you see here. This is something I felt way more comfortable to tell to the general public about. I wrote a book which is not yet in English, but basically is about what I know as a neurologist working in intensive care and neurology and rehab, about the damaged brain and about neuroplasticity, how the brain can heal itself after trauma, after hemorrhage, after people who go through terrible accidents of life, cardiac arrest, where we can resuscitate the brain, but the damage in the brain is very often critical indeed. And we would, with the team, use all these high-tech machines. And that's what you see here. It's a picture from that book. It's in our university hospital where I am right now, in Liège, in Belgium, where we use here a brain-computer interface measuring the electrical activity of a patient who can't communicate. And so that's our area of expertise. It is the study of thoughts and perceptions and emotions, but in the damaged brain. That is also a huge scientific challenge. I think it is one of the biggest mysteries we are, as scientists, facing, together with the other big questions, the origin of matter, the origin of life. I think also understanding consciousness truly is a tremendous challenge. And that is also what we do with the team here, and the research unit I created, the Giga Consciousness, where we are about 40 people looking at the damaged brain with the Coma Science Group, but also what changes in your mind and brain when we give anesthetics or psychedelic drugs for that matter, and what's happening when you dream or in hypnotic state, which is something I studied way before meditation. And at meetings like these, maybe it's good to start with the basics. And what makes your brain so brilliant is not only that you have a lot of brain cells, you have billions, but those cells, those neurons, are very different from any other cell in your body. And the first person who saw that is Ramon y Cajal. He would receive the Nobel Prize later on. He's looking here through his microscope, and he would see for the very first time these branches. Neurons have dendrites, axons, and a lot of connections. Actually, they connect and communicate with thousands of other brain cells. And that's what making this organ so complex. It's these thousands of billions of synapses, of brain bridges, which is what he here, and this is his drawing, shows as little dots. So if, of course, we will remember anything of this webinar, which I do hope so, you will somehow change those thousands of billions of synapses. So that's where I feel comfortable. It's looking at the brain, you know, something material that I can put in brain scans, and yet, as said, we should of course not be too arrogant. And a good example is what we also study, near-death experiences. And I always, when I give lectures, use the opportunity to, you know, invite people to share their experience. So if anyone knows or, you know, can help us to increase our database, we now have thousands of testimonies, but it truly is fascinating how the suffering brain, and it needs a lot of energy, can have these very rich feelings we call near-death experiences, and also sometimes these out-of-body experiences. For some, actually are taken as proof that the mind can exist out of the brain independently. And so that's also part of our challenges, to look at this with an open mind, yet with the scientific method, meaning we will try to confront what we think to understand with what we think we measure. So that's about the scientific challenges. And then as a physician, a neurologist, I see a lot of patients with, of course, complaints. They are having headaches or chronic pains or insomnia, they can't sleep. Often they would come to me because they're afraid of the psychiatrist when they're having anxiety or depression or burnout. And well, through my studies, I was, you know, I learned to prescribe pills and interventions, surgeries, and I think that's only part of the story. And I think that the challenge for each and every one of us to, you know, define our own meaning of life is not only just some happy pill that would solve it all. And yet that is, I think, what many of the patients I see somehow ask for. Give me a quick fix, doctor, prescribe me something. And very often, of course, now my job is to actually try and stop these tranquilizers, because many of these pills put kind of brakes to our brain function. So how do we do that? How do we find peace with ourselves, and how do we establish these relationships, the balance between work and life? And that, I think, is something I never read in any of my medical textbooks. And I'm a big skeptic, which makes it very interesting that I'm talking here tonight about meditation, where I remember a journalist in 2000 asking me the question, just after I defended my doctoral thesis. He said, well, Professor Laureys, what do you think about mindfulness? And so as a true scientist, you go and look at the evidence, right? What is published in scientific journals? And that's what you see here. This is of the no-nonsense meditation book, a graph where I show, well, since the 70s to now, what has been published. And in gray, it's the papers on mindfulness, in black on meditation. And at the time, you can see here, 2000, I was not convinced. There wasn't, for me, a lot of scientific evidence. And that has, of course, tremendously changed. The last 20 years, you see an explosion. There's an exponential increase with mindfulness now being the most studied when we talk about meditation. Just last year, there were nearly 1,800 scientific articles just in 1 year. So I think I can no longer say that mindfulness is something, you know, not scientifically proven, that it's esoteric, or that it is, you know, something light as I thought at the time. And as many people, I needed a personal crisis to actually stop and think about how I was functioning and what were my values. And not gonna give you my whole story. It's in the book, but in 2012, I went through a very difficult and dark moment when I was alone with my 3 young kids, thinking about what was happening, how it could ever happen, and what was going to happen. And you know, as a busy guy in the hospital with running the clinic and in the lab running the unit, it was just turning, and I couldn't find rest, sleepless nights. So I was drinking, smoking. I took sleeping pills, antidepressants, and it was very soon very clear that this wasn't the inspiring dad that I wanted to be for my 3 kids. And then I started doing yoga, which was really a very interesting experience. But also I met a very special man, you of course all know, Matthieu Ricard, in Paris at a TEDx 2013. And that was, you know, my rainbow and the beginning of change. He was talking in Paris about his area of expertise, meditation, compassion. And I was giving a talk about what I know, the brain and brain damage and consciousness and coma. And I still don't understand how or why, but it kind of quickly, we were on the same wavelength. And I imagine that kind of transparent, he felt, he understood I was not the most happy, me, and he invited me to a retreat, which was actually the first retreat of Mind and Life Europe in 2014 in Chiemsee, beautiful place in Germany where I discovered a new world. Of course, all the wonderful people, a couple of whom are, I think, with us. Amy, of course, and Diego, I think, is also with us. And that was just wonderful to see not only experts of the mind and contemplation, but also scientists, wonderful people, and a wonderful personal experience. So after that invitation from Matthieu, it was my turn to say, well, I invite you to my lab as a guinea pig. And so it happened that he left his monastery in Nepal, and here you see him in a very different setting, disappearing in an MRI scan. We're now 2015, and he was a wonderful guinea pig, permitting, of course, the very skeptical scientist I am to see with my own eyes what meditation, in his case, more than 60,000 hours or so, does to the structure of the brain. And Matthieu is not with us tonight, but he's a little bit with us because this actually is a 3D print of his brain. So this is quite impressive. It is on my desktop all the time, the gray matter of our good friend, Buddhist monk and translator of the Dalai Lama, Matthieu Ricard, who is also, of course, a scientist. And so it was wonderful to discuss with him, and that really in the spirit of Mind and Life, bringing these 2 universes together. And actually, with objective measures, tackling something so complicated and so subjective and personal as human consciousness. And then, as you know, and as I can summarize in the book, all of the other studies do show that meditation actually develops your brain. You see an increase just as you go and do sport. I think meditation can be compared with sport. And if you go running, you will get strong muscles in your legs. If you go swimming, you would get shoulders. You would see the change. It's a bit more difficult with your brain because it's inside the skull, but actually the machines do show something like that. His brain of Matthieu, he's 70 plus, when he came here, and he's like 10, 15 years younger in terms of his neurological age. And some parts, and they're colored here in the slide, and this is again from the book, are really when we do what we call volumetry. So we would calculate what is now the mass of these structures, and is it different from someone else of his age? Yes, it is. And it is in the hippocampus, which is important for memory. It is in blue in what we call the insular cortex, which is important for many functions, also related to actually being aware of information from within your own body. And I think attention is very, as you know, important in meditation. And so no surprise that the big, critical hub for attention, which is the anterior cingulate cortex, you see there in green, is structurally bigger, more developed in people who do a lot of meditation, as we could see in Matthieu and many other monks and experts in meditation. And then there's not just attention about your thoughts and perceptions, but also emotions. And again, these in yellow above his eye, left prefrontal area, where Matthieu has shown a very special brain, and he's therefore called the most happy man in the world, which of course he thinks is nonsense. But it is interesting to see how meditation changes specific areas, networks, I should say, in the gray matter, but also in the white matter. So this is what you see here. You may recognize the face of Matthieu. And now with MRI and diffusion imaging, we can actually look at those thousands of billions of brain tracts. And they're artificially colored. In blue, the tracts that go down to the spinal cord and control the muscles. In yellow, green, those who go from front to back. And in red, you have these transcallosal connections. It's a bridge that permits both of your hemispheres to interact. And so meditation, as we could see, as many studies have shown, increases the structural connectivity also between hemispheres. And we also put Matthieu in the PET scanner from positron emission tomography, because your brain uses a lot of energy, actually more than any other organ in your body. And we can inject radioactive glucose and then see what we call is brain metabolism. So you see Matthieu, this again, now it's another machine, and you see the result, this slice with, again, the artificial colors, red and yellow, showing us how much energy is used by those thousands of billions of synapses. And with age, this decreases. This is just a physiological reality. Starting from 40, I'm not sure how old you all are, but we better accept it. When we get older, this brain metabolism decreases, and we have difficulties to accept that we get older, and we would, put these Botox or we care about our skin, and maybe it is also good to care about what's happening inside. And studies are actually showing, you see the reference, that meditation, mindfulness has a positive impact on that process. And actually European multicentric studies, and Liège is one of those partners, headed by a very important pioneer in terms of mindfulness research, Antoine Lutz, very active in Mind and Life, from Lyon, the team in Caen, showing that people who are older and at risk for degenerative dementia can positively influence the progression of the disease. Of course, meditation will not offer a vaccine or will not cure you from Alzheimer, but I think it is worth telling that you actually have a role to play, and meditation there is just part of the other many very important factors, part of our life hygiene. Physical activity. We should do sport. We should have good quality sleep. what we eat, our social contacts, all of that, of course, has an important role, and meditation is just one of them. And that has been shown scientifically. Now, again, the brain produces electricity with electroencephalography. We can measure that. You see here Matthieu with 250 plus electrodes on his head. And we measure what's going on when Matthieu is sitting comfortably and doing nothing. Well, even Matthieu, even the Dalai Lama, even the best Zen master maybe tonight with us, you know, your brain can't help it. It produces these thoughts and perceptions and emotions, and they would jump from one to the other. And we would even see that, as our team has shown, and as we've, you know, past 25 years of my professional career, we've been looking with these machines through thoughts and perceptions and emotions, especially in coma, where even there, we thought there would be nothing, and yet there is still some residual activity in the brain, in the mind. We could see it in sleep, we could see it in anesthesia. Actually, you need to be brain dead for the brain to go completely silent and to have no thoughts. And I don't think meditation aims at getting to some kind of brain death state. What we see when Matthieu and all these other people, for that matter, are doing nothing is on the right of the image shown in a connectivity analysis. Again, you see these threads are the connections, and the more threads, the more connections, and the more red, the more intense. Okay, so this is actually how the brain looks like when you're doing nothing. So there's a lot going on, especially in the what we call self-awareness, internal awareness network, overlapping with the default mode. It is active by default. And then when you meditate, you see this. No big statistics needed. You see a vast increase, more threads, more connections, and more red, more efficient. So meditation is an active mental exercise. To me, it's just a kind of mental gymnastics, for that matter. And it is not thinking of nothing, as we would often hear or read. And to me, it's fascinating that what I've been studying with the team here for the past quarter of a century are these networks important for thoughts, or what we say the internal awareness network. Networks important for perceptions, everything coming through your senses right now, what you see and hear, depending on the connectivity, thalamocortical connectivity of another network, external awareness network. And then, of course, the third one, very important, we are emotional animals. Emotions are so important, and I believe so neglected in our society and educational system. And it has this third, not just one region, but really network important for our emotions, positive, negative, including pain, including happiness and well-being. So that's what we've been studying, but we try to understand if it's still present in the damaged brain. And it's fascinating now to test our hypothesis in healthy people who meditate. But again, I really am not in a position to give any lectures here tonight. I should shut up and let the Zen masters speak. And one of the most impressive Zen masters I know are children. You see here my little son, Louis. I'm not sure if you can hear the sounds. Can you hear it? So what you hear is little Louis, not even 3 years old, in the middle of the lockdown, doing our favorite exercise. You know, it's breathing meditation. It's, again, about attention, bringing your attention to one object, in this case, the breathing. He's not, of course, always so Zen, but I think that if a 3-year-old can do it, if myself, as a hyperactive father of 5 now, can do it, anyone can give it a try. And that's why I also accepted to write the book, and why I'm now spending quite a bit of my time talking about meditation. And when I'm with Matthieu Ricard and we are on stage somewhere, I can actually put electrodes on his forehead and show what's happening inside his mind and brain to the public. This was recorded in Brussels, 3,000 people in front of him. And so he just sits there, and we have this little device, and on my smartphone, I see a real-time analysis of all those different components. EEG measures are just one representation of brain complexity, and we can decompose it, in this case, to like general features such as arousal or general attention and focused attention and thoughts, emotions, executive function. So you see these colors representing the intensity of each of these components jumping from one to the other. Okay, it's yellow and then blue and red and green and yellow again. So this visualizes the monkey mind. You all know the wild animal sometimes that seems to have your mind a bit out of control, creating these constant stream of conscious thoughts, perceptions, and emotions. And then what happens when we meditate? Well, before I show you, let's maybe, and we can talk a lot about science and theory, and I think it's important, but meditation, of course, it's all about just doing the thing. And many of you way more experienced than myself, so I would just propose we take a couple of conscious breaths. And this is what I do in my consultation between two patients. I would just sit comfortably, and I maybe invite each and every one, especially those who are maybe not yet meditating themselves, just sit comfortably and anchor your feet, put your hands on your legs, and you can close your eyes, and we will focus our attention to the breathing. And when we have these thoughts arising, the exercise is just to bring attention back to the breathing. And so we breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Doing great. In, out. And it can help to count 1, 2, keep the attention to the breathing in. And we can exhale a little bit longer. Very good. In. Exhale a bit longer. We'll do 3 more. In. Very good. The last one. Okay, can open the eyes, connect here and now where you are. This is simple exercise, but very powerful. When you do this, your heart rate go down, blood pressure goes down. If you put a catheter and measure stress hormones such as cortisol, noradrenaline, studies have shown they go down. If you every time breathe out, actually it gives you a way to control your autonomous nervous system. It's called autonomous because considered to be outside of conscious control, but actually you can have a control. And when you breathe out, your heart is beating a little slower. And that is because there's a stimulation of what we call the parasympathetic system, which is kind of putting a brake. And the other one, the orthosympathetic, is, the accelerator, which is giving you the energy and the strength to fight or to flight, or when you're confronted with a wild animal. But now it's more activating when you're in a meeting and you have a challenging discussion with a colleague, or you're in a car queuing somewhere, and things get on your nerves. And then I think meditation can be a wonderful way to give you some inner peace. And this is how it looks like. You would see, moment he starts to meditate, and this is on stage, it's not ideal circumstances, you would see something happening. There's a stability, there's here more blue. But meditation as a sport can be, a multitude of exercises, of mental gymnastics. And this is the second exercise, the favorite one of Matthieu, loving kindness, training empathy, compassion. And you would see a very different brain pattern. Again, stability, but now way more red colors. This is artificial, but just to illustrate that meditation, depending on what you're actually doing, can activate different networks. And there's different ways to do it. We just mentioned attention for an object, can be your breathing, can be a mantra, but you can also be attentive to what's happening around you. And you can have a mindful walk. And again, I think we can learn a lot from children. And my little Louis, when he's in the woods, he can be extremely attentive to, a little animal on the road or whatever, and just be there in the now. And myself, when I go for a walk, I'll be calling, or I'd be sending a text, or even if I'm doing nothing in my mind, I'm sometimes elsewhere. And studies show that actually more than half of the time we are elsewhere. And now that's not negative per se, but I do think that meditation offers us an opportunity to actually train attention and to be more mindful, to be where it really matters to be. In this case, being with my son in the woods, and not just being, again, thinking about work or what I need to do or whatever. Also during this talk, it's about 35 minutes or so, you'll be thinking about many, many things. And that's, again, just how the brain works, and meditation offers us a way to train that. Thoughts, perceptions, but also emotions, the third important network. And this is a picture of my daughter, Clara. She's now 22. But I think it's very useful. And we never, again, as children, were told anything about, how are we really? What is our emotional barometer, our meteo? And it's, of course, not always sunny. Sometimes there's clouds, and sometimes it rains, and sometimes it storms, and there's lightning. And so meditation, as you all know, is a way, again, to kind of observe not just thoughts, perceptions, but also emotions. And the brain is not very good in doing multitasking. So when actually you can, at that moment, and that's a challenge, realize and observe, oh, now I have this feeling of anger or sadness or whatever, you are already less angry or sad. And that's what I try. I'm not a Zen master, ask my wife and kids. But as Matthieu says, the challenge is to recognize that little fire and not, letting it become a huge, huge forest fire. My wife is also using this exercise. She's a psychologist and giving mindfulness exercises to children. And again, this is something that really deserves more attention. But now let's talk again about our super guinea pig, Matthieu Ricard, and of course the many others who came. But the first paper was together again with our friends from Lyon, Antoine Lutz, and also the team from Milano, where we actually developed a very simplified way to quantify consciousness. A bit arrogant, but it's testing Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory. So basically with TMS, you see the white thing on his head, put a very strong magnetic pulse, and we would activate part of the cortex you see behind him on the screen. This is the cortex of Matthieu Ricard, and then the red star is where we stimulate the brain, and then we read out the electrical echo, and the complexity of that informs us about the capacity of the brain to generate consciousness. And we've done that in hundreds of volunteers. We validated in anesthesia, then the values go down in deep sleep, and now use it in patients with brain damage after coma. But you can't change that normally. We never ever saw that. And then comes Matthieu, and by the pure willful act of meditation, he could actually increase these measures or decrease these measures. And that was actually what we published with, of course, Matthieu, not just as a guinea pig, but as a co-author. As you know, he's a PhD from Institut Pasteur. And what's wonderful and really in the spirit of Mind and Life is that he's doing that with a number of labs. Before he came here, he worked with Richard Davidson. You see the paper there. Also with Antoine Lutz, and we collaborate for many years with medicine. But you also see Tanya Singer on the huge European study that she's leading. And of course, the important finding that, yes, meditation gives you a way to do emotional training, compassion, empathy. And finally, the study we mentioned in Scientific Reports recently, where Antoine Lutz and his colleagues showed that it actually has a positive impact of brain metabolic activity and aging. So we now start to know what are the effects of meditation on the mind, the brain, the body, and also in terms of our genetic material. So this is again a picture from the book. You see your chromosomes and these small black kind of protectors. That's really what they do. They protect your genetic material. They're telomeres. And when you get older, they get smaller and you get more vulnerable to develop diseases, including cancer. And when you have a lot of, these worries going on and on and on, this apparently studies show, and you see the reference and they're in the book, this process is accelerating. And meditation gives you a way to positively impact and change that natural process of your telomeres getting smaller with age. So I think it is clear now that meditation and numerous clinical trials have shown can have an effect similar to medication, to anxiolytics against anxiety, to antidepressants, to painkillers, analgesics. And I think that is something we as medical doctors and healthcare providers do not yet use enough in our clinical practice. Now, as said, here at the University Hospital, I now prescribe meditation and more specifically mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I do think that it is important to talk about this, to change actually what we see now, where an educational system is investing a lot in knowledge. And we hear a lot about artificial intelligence, and we work within the European Brain Project with these supercomputers and creating these virtual realities. And our brain yet is not a computer. So we should invest in what makes our brains different from these computers. And that is that they have emotions. They have feelings. They are sometimes, quite often, actually irrational, intuitive, creative. And that, I think, that emotional intelligence, that important factor of our emotional well-being is really neglected. There's wonderful initiatives, but I think it should be structural, just like we have gymnastics and a specific teacher. We should also organize something similar for our mental well-being. And of course, at all ages, had the pleasure to meet, of course, the very inspiring person you see here. And as we heard, meditation is just good for you at all ages. And I think it is important to also disconnect it from any religious belief system. I think meditation is not Buddhist. I think meditation is universal and of all time. Aboriginals did it before we even had written history. My wife is Canadian with some Native American blood. Well, part of her culture is through the very ancient, we used to say primitive belief systems, but I think they have a very interesting way to look at nature. We see it in Africa, we see it in our Christian tradition. A lot of, I think, readers now of the book coming back and telling me about what's happening there in terms of contemplative tradition. So that's my message for today. Meditation, for me, is really very vast. It's not even limited to these attention practices. My favorite would be the breathing, and we heard Louis doing it, but you can have a mindful walk, you can have emotional training and compassion. And then thanks, of course, to the international success, the book is now out in 9 languages. Bloomsbury permitted me to discuss this with someone like David Lynch, you see here, and he's a very, very strong defendant of transcendental meditation, whereas you would repeat a mantra. And so I started also trying that out, which I found very interesting. And I also like David, and he's in the book, because the message of the book is you do what you can. And so he would meditate 20 minutes every morning and every evening, and yet he also is enjoying a good cigarette, as you can see on the picture. So that's the basic message. You do what you can. Let's not judge one too quickly. And again, many ways to do it. You can be attentive to your external senses, but also just by enjoying, as Zen Master Louis is doing here, good, excellent chocolate ice cream. And again, I have no, credits whatsoever to teach you anything, except maybe that I'm father of 5, and I can tell you, I do what I can. I'm not every day sitting 2 times 20 minutes on my mat. And I believe that we, of course, at one point need to, stand up, and we're not the whole day on our yoga or meditation cushion. And so what do you do then? And I think that informal meditation that you can basically do throughout the day, which is what I try to do. And then there's not a day where I'm not meditating, even in very challenging conditions. And with wonderful distractors you see here in the picture. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Matthieu, and all the wonderful people from Mind and Life. Thank you, Amy. I think you're here with us, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Steven. I would just like to remind our friends that we sent you information about this book that is now available with a special discount due to Steven's help. So you can order this book through bloomsbury.org with a special code that we sent to you in an email. So if you have a chance to buy it, you can do it anytime. And you'll find the information in the email, and we will send another email to all our friends after the talk with the recording, in which we will also mention this special discount that you can have. Now I see that we have several questions already taking shape in the chat. Before going into more specific questions, I would just like to ask you, Steven, why is the title and what does it mean? Can you explain us the title a little bit? What does it mean that it's a no-nonsense meditation book?
So I accepted the proposition from the publisher to call it the no-nonsense meditation book, because I believe that in their seeing of things, there was a lot being said, and somehow I indeed have the impression that many people think, mindfulness meditation, it's just fashion. There's all the commercial hype and so many things being said and written, and what's actually scientifically proven, which seems to be very important for people to actually see that this is doing something in your brain structurally and functionally. So I think that's why they proposed this title, and it somehow stuck.
Thank you. Amy, may I turn to you first? You posted 2 questions in the chat.
Well, hi, how are you, Steven? Nice to see you. Thank you for the talk. One you've already kind of answered, because I was asking about whether you measured different types of practices. So you kind of already answered that one. Compassion, open presence. I don't know if you can hear me.
Can you repeat? Because I didn't get the question. Can you repeat?
I was just saying that one question you've sort of already answered, which was about if you'd studied different styles of practices like open presence, but you kind of answered that one. So, so I was also wondering whether you'd heard about this recent Tukdam project that's happening in the south of India, where a whole group of Russian scientists who are studying the body after the death of a great meditator. And they've been joined by some of the Americans, for like Richie Davidson. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that, because apparently after 37 days, they've discovered many, many different aspects of actually his body, 37 days after death, than would happen with a kind of a normal non-meditator, guru meditator type body. So I was wondering if you knew about that project and you had any thoughts, because this whole question of out-of-body experience, and it's so interesting to all the meditators, whether the mind is in the brain or the mind is something different from the brain.
Yes, I think we all wait for these results to go through peer review, and I think it's a big challenge, right, for science to study death, because by definition, it's something where you're not supposed to come back, and what can we meaningfully say about something that for us as a society and also as a medical doctor, I'm supposed to declare a person dead or alive, and yet it's not an event, it's a process. And so well, within my area of expertise, which is traumatic brain injury and intensive care, and seeing a lot of people who are brain dead, there it is maybe important that, okay, near-death experiences are happening near death. So these people were not nor brain death or death according to the classical cardiorespiratory criteria. And how fascinating it is to see, I would say, finally, more scientific interest in the process of dying. And how well, I think, and this is for me maybe also an important personal journey, how from, I was raised Christian, and then went to university, became a convinced atheist, and as a scientist you want to reduce everything, and um,
Mm.
now the challenge is to somehow reconnect to, meaning and experience, and yeah, call it spirituality, which for many scientists would be, kind of a big word. So how do you do that? And of course, as a physician, I don't see my role. I'm not a priest, I'm not a philosopher, so finding meaning in life, I think it's this huge personal journey. Um, and so the challenge for us scientists to appreciate both of these approaches. And so when I used to watch a rainbow, or my children being born, and you understand the physics and the biology, and of course,
Mm.
you should just wonder in front of the miracle that is, the universe outside, the universe inside, and um, the miracle of life. So that's really the exercise that I think each and every one is kind of confronted with. But definitely a very wonderful thing that these projects are happening. I don't think it's good that in science we would consider some things taboo, and I think we have auto censored ourselves way too long. I started in the 90s looking at consciousness, and it
Right.
was really not done, and very happy that that has finally changed.
Thank you.
Diego.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Lovely seeing you again. And thank you very much for your wonderful summary of your research over the past years. And there was something that you said that kind of like intrigued me and brought me back to when I was with Richie in the lab as one of the guinea pigs. I was also there one time when Mingyur Rinpoche was there. And then Richie said, yeah, Mingyur Rinpoche's brain is just younger as his age. And you mentioned the same thing. And it actually brought back, there was a question I forgot to ask. How was Richie able to say that? And you said the same thing, that Matthieu's brain is younger than his chronological age. And of course, we can do telomere assessment, we can do regeneration studies and looking at the connectivity or learning capacities. Now, how come that you can say that Matthieu's brain is 10 to 15 years younger than his sort of chronological age?
Thanks, Diego, for this question. So there's a couple of things. So you can just measure the thickness of his cortex, right? And so when you get older, to oversimplify, your brain is kind of shrinking. You can look at brain metabolism with glucose PET imaging. And again, when you're getting older, the metabolic activity decreases. And then, of course, we need to be very careful. There's a lot of confounding factors that we need to bring into account here. And, we're looking statistically, if we take a cohort of people in different age groups, and then we look at those people who do a lot of meditation, there is indeed, and I think it's been um, um, reproduced, a positive effect. Now, there's many things there. And of course, these Buddhist monks, Rinpoche, and they have a very different lifestyle, right, than definitely my own. And it makes me think my wife, when, these monks came and then they stay, like Matthieu, also stay at home, and then she said, it's easy for them to be Zen. They don't have a partner. They don't have these 5 kids running around and going to the grocery stores and having a full-time job and so on and so forth, and then they have a different diet, and all of that is true. So that's why I think it's wonderful, the work, of course, of Tanya Singer, where you take a bunch of people, you put them in the machines, you do your measures, and then they start a program, and you have these longitudinal follow-ups, and then again you see that, yeah, there are measurable effects, even for simple mortals as myself who do what they can. And I think that's the take-home message, that you know, you don't need to be a monk to have the benefits here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I read Catherine's post in the chat. Catherine, you may want to share it yourself, maybe with some other additional remarks. So, Catherine.
Yes, great speech, great talk, Stephen, wonderful. And I agree with, you know, everything you say. So I'm just making a little caveat, really. I work in the area of education, and we've just written some guidance on mindfulness in schools, which we made very evidence-based. And in fact, there's a chapter in there on the changes in the brain that mindfulness meditation can induce. And we know that's very attractive for schools and teachers. So I'm completely on board with everything you say. And I think you'll be on board with what I'm going to say, but I think it just needs saying, which is we've got to be quite careful that teachers don't get the message, or anybody get the message, that formal mindfulness meditation is for everyone. It's a magic bullet and everyone must do it, because teachers can start talking about it being mandatory for all young people. And we know that actually that's not just put them off, some of them, but may be quite dangerous if they have suffering from trauma or current depression. So I really liked your message about the wider types of practice, you know, like mindful eating or mindful walking. And I would say actually just getting across that the core attitudes of mindfulness, of open-mindedness and kindness and being fully present with whatever you're doing, are incredibly helpful for everyone. But the more formal we get, the more we might call it meditation with a capital M, the more careful we've got to be in our messaging. And that's something we're very aware of, because people just seize on this very simplistically, and we don't want to do any harm. And I just wondered what you thought of that point. Looks like you're nodding, so probably okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine.
Great talk, wonderful.
Thank you so much, and you're absolutely right. Again, one could say, well, can we oblige everyone to, you know, start running? No, of course not. And we need to be careful, and that's why you have someone who has the professional training. And I think for meditation, again, you need these skills and the formal training to adapt it to the specific needs. But in the meantime, I think we all could benefit from some more attention about, you know, mental processes. And yeah, absolutely on the same line. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Stephen. Hannah Tolle, you also indicated you have a question.
Yeah, thank you for the great talk, Stephen. I am actually a graduate student in neuroscience right now and doing my master project on consciousness research as well, and I greatly admire your work. And my question is, because I know that in consciousness research, many people try to kind of distinguish between different states of consciousness, like, for example, coma or anesthesia or psychedelic states. And I was wondering, because you showed that apparently different kinds of meditation can have very different effects on the brain. So, like, for example, you showed that love and kindness meditation did something very differently than like just a normal breathing meditation. And so I was wondering whether there's, like, what is it that makes meditation as a whole so beneficial? Is there anything that is consistent that you think might have this beneficial effect on all these kind of health-related things? Or, yeah.
So it's difficult question. Your first question about consciousness, well, we lack a formal definition that we would all agree upon, and it just illustrates our ignorance, basically. And then what does meditation is a little bit like what does sport, right? That there's a lot of things happening, and a lot of reasons why you would like to try one or the other thing out. So just the fact that you pay attention to all these mental processes and the different type of exercises or techniques or whatever you want to call it, I think is still something that needs more study, and that's exactly what we do now. And when we were last Mind and Life meeting, where was it, where we had the people doing hypnosis, also doing meditation, and then there was even trance, shamanic, we now call it cognitive trance. And so there's a lot of overlap. Also, the exercise with it was a little bit like hypnotic talking, and you can do mental imaging meditation. And so your question is actually now one of the scientific projects here. So what's common, what's different, state, trait. So I can't give you a clear-cut answer, but I'm very, very happy that you're doing your PhD on the subject, and we look forward to your insights, and definitely need more people like you. But definitely, it's really a spectrum, and so there is overlap. I think maybe, and we've not yet emphasized that, we need to separate. Well, why do we meditate? Okay, what are our needs? And so, as a physician, my message, of course, is important to emphasize that when you have a medical problem, you go see a medical doctor, right? Like when you have tooth problem, you go see a dentist. And so here, I think that's important, that you're in good hands. But then, of course, we shouldn't wait till we are sick, and there's all these things we can do. But in terms of consciousness, it's really very challenging, because I think it's like a diamond. There are so many aspects, and we reduce it to one dimension, and I think that's far from the truth.
Thank you very much. I realized this was a very difficult question. I didn't expect a definite answer.
Diego is indicating you may have another
He
question.
has the answer.
No. I don't have the answer, but I have certainly a caveat, because in the context of modern perspectives of meditation, we always look at it as an intervention for dysfunctionality, or as a medical intervention for when something is not going well. Now, this is a very classical Western problem, and I'm coming from the pharmaceutical perspective, where you actually use drugs and interventions to exactly sort of attenuate dysfunctionalities. Now, that's not the fundamental purpose, coming from the Buddhist perspective, at least, where meditation was clearly a path towards wisdom. So it was really embedded in a larger context. It was certainly not just as an intervention to modulate dysfunctionality. I'm just exaggerating here a little bit, but it's obviously just very important for me to put that out there, that we know that meditation does originally, or where it's coming from, a Tibetan word, is actually familiarizing yourself with what? With the workings of the mind. And the Sanskrit word was bhavana, or it still is. And so that we translate as meditation, but it actually means cultivating. And what do we cultivate? We're obviously cultivating positive qualities of the mind. So here you have a definition of what meditation is, which is the intentional, and this is very important. It's not just by haphazard. It's an intentional process of familiarization with the workings of the mind and the cultivation of positive qualities. So here I think it might give you, Hannah, a little bit of an angle of what is meditation originally meant for. It's really to cultivate the positive qualities of the mind. We need to investigate what that is. And it's meant also as a path towards wisdom. Thank you very much, though.
Thank you, Diego. And maybe you can help me out here. Also, I think it's fascinating to see, you mentioned where the word comes from, meditation, and then it's so close to medication and medicine and this common root. So both are useful, are they not? I think, but also we should be clear how and why we use them. Absolutely. Thank you.
We still have time for a couple of more questions if you want to raise some more, especially those who haven't spoken yet. In the meantime, I'm asking another question, Steven, and if you want to raise some, please indicate that in the chat and I will give you the floor. So Steven, my question is that this book has been published in Dutch originally and then later on in English. I know that when one publishes a book like this, and talks about a book like this, it's part of the past already in a way. So I'm sure you have something else in your mind working on something else right now, maybe a research project, maybe another paper or another book, or there's a new question that you are pondering about after having finished this book. So I'm wondering what you are doing right now, what your key questions are right now.
I'm doing too much, my family would say. That is why I need to take some, a step back, and I'm going on a sabbatical because there's too many projects. So scientifically, as said, we're comparing hypnosis to the different forms of meditation and trance with a wonderful person called Corinne Sombrin. We just had also funding approved. All of that, of course, is the theme. My credit is limited here. Using it after cancer. And then there's, the whole challenge of, by all possible angles, looking at consciousness. And book-wise, the publisher, it's indeed Flemish, because many people ask questions about, well, how should we do it? So they were happy that the neurologist said, well, meditation is not so crazy idea after all. So they said, well, we need a book about how to do it. So there is now the how-to book, but it's only in Dutch and French, and we'll see how it goes. And that being done, they ask, well, we know your wife, a psychologist, is giving meditation and mindfulness to children. And so we're working on a book for children, which is illustrated by my brother, who's an artist. So we're very happy with that family project. And then I said, I think I should read my books again and be a bit more mindful and have less crazy wild stuff going on. But definitely I'm very happy with how things how it all worked out. And again, I'm so happy to be here with you from Mind and Life, and I hope to take the time to enjoy more together of what I think is a wonderful journey.
Thank you, Steven. And in the meantime, Tommaso Tossato, who is also here with us, raised his hand in the chat that he would like to ask a question from you. Hello, Tommaso. It's good to see you in these webinars.
Same for me. It's these seminars are always an highlight of my weeks, and they influence my mood for a little longer after the seminar is over. So thank you for this. Steven, I have a question for you. It's more a question that I make to myself, but I think I would like to know how you or others can relate to it. So, for example, you were showing some plot where you were analyzing the brain activity of a meditator, and you were also showing that you can do this online to Matthieu Ricard. And I guess what you were showing, it was a power spectrum, like how different the power for different frequencies was varying in time. So I'm also doing research as a neuroscientist, and on the side I'm a meditator, and I find extremely fascinating, like to take a meditator and do an EEG to him while he is meditating. But at the same time, I'm always wondering, like, what is telling us something like, okay, there are more gammas. Like, is this explaining us how meditation work? Are these the neural correlate of meditation? Because everything has neural correlates, and me as a meditator, what do I gain from knowing that when I stick an electrode to my face, like there are more gammas? Like, do I have any gain? Like, will my meditation be anyhow better from me knowing this? And why we as a society, we need to know it. Like, for sure there is the component of showing society that actually meditation work, and that's extremely important for like convincing institution to make it more accessible, making it part of the education. But from the aspect of knowledge, of wisdom, of like me improving my practice, do you think is it meaningful, and how should we do it in the future? Because I think like in the last 30 years there was also this excitement of doing it for the first time, but now we did it for the first time. So how should we do it in the future, and why should we do it in the future?
Thank you, Tommaso. You're absolutely right. Of course, you don't need this to meditate, right? And it's just correlates, as you mentioned. And so actually what I showed was not really the classical spectral analysis of time frequency power spectrum. It's more close to a independent component analysis, but whatever. And so you already answered your question, right? You don't need this, and yet I do think it is wonderful that we have these worlds coming together, and that we're trying to bridge. If we want to understand consciousness, I think it's really important, and this is something that is so important for mind and life, and what we hear during the meetings is neurophenomenology. So what's actually going on in my mind, and the challenge to somehow describe that in whatever terms, and then use these objective measures. And I'm very happy to do that, because I believe, maybe it's naively optimistic, and Michel Bitbol would think otherwise, that maybe we will never understand. But I think that would maybe be, my favorite philosopher is James Bond. So never say never, and let's just give it a try. And consciousness is a huge mystery, and we shouldn't be too arrogant. We don't know. I mean, past 25 years, I was very, very excited, and a couple of things we did for the first time, especially in coma and so forth. But can I say now we understood 50% of it, or 5%, or 0.005%? We just don't know how much we don't know. And that's why we need to, look at this with a very open mind, but at least give it a try. And basically that's what we do with all these machines and all these, depending, of course, on the technology we have. And we don't have the machine we want, right? Because we're doing these very macroscopic, very imprecise measures, including with EEG or fMRI, or we put electrodes and then we know what's happening, but at a very, very small part of it. So, well, I think it is important. And of course, as a physician, I see that consciousness matters, right? When you hit your head and you have bleedings and you lose parts of your mind, and you lose, the capacity to generate thoughts or perceptions or emotions or personality changes, it does matter. And that's why I think it's good to have this knowledge and these technologies, and then translate it just already, because it permits us to be better caregivers. And in the meantime, as you say, it's all about your experience, and you don't need all these fancy things. They can help, and we have these feedback, whatever, like Muse or like Neurosteer or whatever feedback you get, and some people need that, and that's okay. even if we really should be clear, it's just correlates. We do not have a explanatory theory, I would say, yet. Let me be naively optimistic.
So probably that's why we need to continue doing this work.
Absolutely.
We don't have the explanatory theory yet.
So that will be for Hannah and a couple of other future Nobel Prize winners to get us there a little bit closer.
So I'm mindful of your time, Steven. So I may just let Eva Vonasek ask the last question. And I know you have a big family and a lot of things to manage with them in the evening. So this is going to be the last question.
Thank you so much, Gabor.
Eva, can you please unmute yourself?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. When I think of meditation and wisdom, looking for wisdom and being wise and positive thinking and positive emotions and feelings, I always go into a scale levels. So we're trying to reach a higher level, but do we know enough of the lower level? So are we building a scale, or are we just using medication? So for me, it's building a scale, building a level, trying to reach higher levels. So I think science also needs to know the lower levels and to be able to compare them. That's why no nonsense would make more sense to me if we can compare the lower levels with higher levels. So positive and negative, following a little bit from Tommaso. Okay, so can we describe the negative levels of the mind, criminality, alcoholic dementia, and all these problems, compared to the positive levels of a meditation of a guru? I mean, can we do it now, or it's just for Anatoly to do it?
There's a lot on your shoulders, Hannah. No, I think maybe, I would not put it just on one dimension, right? So it would, to me, it doesn't fit on just one scale with higher, lower, whatever. And that we can learn from all those different dimensions. So I think it's definitely not black or white. It's not even 50 shades of gray. It's really all the colors of the rainbow. And that, there's what we call mental diseases. It's not always so straightforward. And there's some things that we struggle. Is this now positive, negative? And of course, meditation also is an invitation to, observe and maybe see some things we would consider negative as also having, other aspects to it. But absolutely, you're right that these are very, very challenging notions, wisdom, and when are we wise, and when are we mad, or the many aspects of creativity, of attention or hyper. I think it's such a challenging thing to study the mind and its complexity that I fully agree with you that we need to look at it. I wouldn't say up or down in one, but from all the possible directions, both in meditation and its many possible ways to experience it, and the other things we discussed, such as hypnosis, such as trance, such as psychedelic drugs, such as dreaming, lucid dreaming, and then of course the different brain diseases and how they modify our minds in many, many different ways. Hard to say if it is just binary, negative or positive, but I agree with you. Thank you for that.
My problem is criminality for me is negative so far.
Criminality is negative, yes, but again, this is not in my area of expertise, but I think we all have these different aspects in us, do
Yeah.
we not? So
Absolutely.
I think that is part of our humanity, including looking at the other animals. So there is definitely work to be done, and I'm happy to see at the current time that at least there is this interaction and there is this curiosity, even if it is complex, it is real, and I think we can definitely use it for the benefit of each and every one of us. So let's try.
Thank you for your talk. Very nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you for sharing your talk and your book with us. We will share this talk with all the other friends in the community and later on with the general public. It was nice to have you here. Thank you everyone for your attention, your participation, your active involvement in the discussion, your questions and your thoughts, and your potential future research in this field, following the footsteps of Steven, which of course we need. So thank you so much for joining us, and hope that we will meet soon again in other activities of Mind and Life Europe. Just please follow our newsletters or website. There's a lot coming in the next few weeks, including dialogue with the Dalai Lama on June 9th and other programs, still paying tribute to Francisco Varela in this anniversary year. And thank you for joining us today and in other programs as well. Thank you, Steven. Thank you all.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.